From the studios of Foxboro Cable Access, located in the center of Foxborough, Massachusetts, you are watching Around Foxborough.
Welcome back to another episode of Around Foxborough. My name is Jay Love. I'm your host. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today we have a very special guest that I met at Foxborough Rotary Club. She was one of our guest speakers, and I was very impressed with her story, and then we can learn a lot from her. So let's invite our guest. Hi, Isabella. Thank you so much for coming to Around Foxborough today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So can you introduce us, who you are, your first last name, and what you do?
My name is Isabella Sacharczyk. I am the board of director as well as Massachusetts chapter director for the Pediatric Hydrocephalus Foundation. So
what is your foundation, and then how can people find more about it? Do you have any website or social media?
So we are the Pediatric Hydrocephalus Foundation. We can be found on Facebook and Instagram, I believe. The foundation also has a website. It's hydrokids.org. We have the Massachusetts chapter has a Facebook page. It's Massachusetts Pediatric Hydrocephalus Foundation, as well as the Pediatric Hydrocephalus Foundation has their own Facebook page.
So what is the mission of the foundation?
So I do want to start by kind of defining hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus is an incurable brain condition where the cerebral spinal fluid doesn't drain. Currently, the only treatment is brain surgery. And so our mission as an organization is to not only support the families that are affected by this condition, but also to raise money for research and to move forward research.
And what does this foundation mean to you?
So I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet. The foundation is very important to me. I actually have hydrocephalus, and I have had 23 brain surgeries because of it. I first found the foundation about 10 years ago at a time when I was struggling with my condition, and I was looking for support. And the foundation welcomed me with open arms, and then helped me kind of find my mission in life, and they helped me blossom into the person I am today, so I can't thank them enough.
So what are the activities do you guys do? I know you sent some photos. What are those photos that you sent us?
So as a foundation, we hold fundraisers all throughout the year. The Massachusetts chapter, we've done walks over the years. We've also done flag raising at the beginning of Hydrocephalus Month, which is September, to kind of kickstart Hydrocephalus Awareness Month and just to help make our community aware of this important issue. We've held the past 2 years, the Massachusetts chapter has held a pig roast that has been very successful. And we hold a variety of different fundraisers across the country in different chapters. There is a derby that a chapter does. There's a pasta dinner that happens. So we just hold a variety of different fundraisers throughout the year, which allows us to, at the end of the year, hand-pick research projects and be able to fund them. I just came back from our board meeting, our end-of-the-year board meeting, and we approved to fund $72,500 worth of research projects due to our efforts this year.
That's incredible. So talk to us about your surgery. You said you have 23 surgeries.
Yes.
But I know from our conversation or your speech from the Rotary Club Foxborough that not only the brain surgery, you had some different surgeries too. Can you talk to us about it?
Sure. So my journey with hydrocephalus started about a month after birth I was diagnosed with E. coli bacterial meningitis, which caused a stroke, and the damage from the stroke and the meningitis resulted in my hydrocephalus. They put my first shunt in. So in order to drain the fluid that builds up on your brain due to the hydrocephalus, they put a device in that drains the fluid, and that's the shunt. So they put that in around a month old, and since then I've had 23 surgeries. Not all of them were brain surgeries. And the reason for the brain surgeries is blockages, infections, breakages. And so throughout the last 26 years, I've had blockages in my shunt, which result or require a brain surgery. I've had an infection caused by a perforation that also required a surgery. And I've had breakages as well. So I've had pretty much anything that can go wrong with your shunt, I've had to endure. So.
And then I know you told us about doctors were telling your parents that you wouldn't be maybe able to talk or walk, but your parents really fought for it.
Yes. Yes. So when I was after the diagnosis of the stroke and the meningitis, my parents were given the prognosis that I would never walk, talk, see, hear, and they advised my parents to put me in a home for the mentally and physically disabled. My mom fought tooth and nail. She took me to play groups, occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. And then when I entered school, she continued those services to make sure I had the best shot at living a somewhat normal life. And I am proud to say I just received my bachelor's degree in biology, graduating summa cum laude from Westfield State University. And I am now pursuing a post-bachelor position at Boston Children's Hospital, after which I will pursue my PhD in research, which wouldn't have been even something I would have been able to do without the support from my family and the foundation. The foundation really brought me out of my shell and really helped me develop my goals as to what I wanted to do when I grew up.
So obviously you had very different upbringing than other kids who never had to do 23 surgeries. And I think it was before you were age 18?
Yes, so all my surgeries happened before I was 18.
So how did it like for your elementary school, middle school, high school life with having so much surgeries all the time?
It was very isolating at times because there were times when I was out of school for a month to 3 months, and then my 10th grade year, I was out the whole entire school year. So it was a very isolated time in my life. I didn't have a lot of friends. It was a challenge because I mean for the first 18 years of my life, I mean, I more or less lived in the hospital. There was one year I had 6 surgeries in a 3-month period. And then, like I said, my 10th grade year, I had a surgery the first day of my 10th grade year. And when I woke up from my surgery, I was unable to walk. So I spent the entirety of my 10th grade year learning to walk again in 3 to 4 hours of therapy, 3 or 4 times a week. Thankfully, my school was wonderful, and they had a tutor come and tutor me and keep me up to date and on track to graduate. But it was very isolating. And I mean, it was tough for my whole family. I mean, even my sister, I have a younger sister, and now us being adults, she'll tell me stories and she's like, it was horrible watching my sister in the hospital bed, and we're spending Christmas around her hospital bed because she's recovering from surgery. So it was definitely tough. But I've said this time and time again, if it wasn't for my diagnosis, I would not have the passion to not only help fund a cure for hydrocephalus, but also be part of that um, through my efforts in pursuing a career in hydrocephalus research.
And you talked us about the difference between your experience and then maybe ER or different doctors kind of take on shunt malfunction that you mentioned that maybe you don't have to go to ER, maybe it's a preset or something. Can you talk to us about how the shunt works, and then sometimes maybe the doctor's not as educated as it could be?
So in my experience, doctors and especially ER doctors, they're taught the definition of hydrocephalus. They're taught the signs and symptoms of hydrocephalus malfunction. But those aren't always, it's not always that cut and dry. And that's the biggest issue that we as the hydrocephalus community have when we go to the ER. Because I'll present with a series of symptoms that may not match exactly somebody else's symptoms or the textbook definition of symptoms. I have a condition called slit ventricle syndrome, which was caused by the hydrocephalus. So my ventricles in my brain that kind of house the CSF, the cerebrospinal fluid, they don't expand with fluid. So when there's a blockage, you don't see the increase in pressure in your brain. So while my scans and tests say that I'm not having a malfunction, I'm actually having a malfunction. And it takes having a good relationship with your doctor and also being an advocate for yourself. That's another thing that we do as a foundation, is teach our moms and dads and the children with hydrocephalus to be an advocate for yourself. And push. If you think that there's something wrong, push. Because you know your body best. I mean, I know my body very well. I actually can tell which part of my shunt, there's 3 parts of your shunt, which part of my shunt is actually malfunctioning. But it took having a really good doctor to listen to me and say, okay, Bella, I believe you. We have to do X, Y, and Z, but I believe you. And then I would come out of surgery and he says, you were right, Bella. That part of your shunt was malfunctioning. But the education, there's a lack in education, and there's a disconnect. And that's another goal of mine once I pursue my PhD, to enter the world of academia as a professor, to help teach the next generation of doctors and nurses to not treat these hydrocephalic patients as textbook. I've said this time and time again, hydrocephalus symptoms are not set in stone, they're a spectrum. I may have 1 or 3 or 4 symptoms that are the same every malfunction, but there's some symptoms that I have with one malfunction that I don't have with another. And so teaching the next generation of doctors to listen to your patients is, I guess, will be my biggest goal as an educator.
I remember you telling me some of the professor invited you to a biology class, to talk about the symptom stuff.
Yes, so I took a neurobiology course during my undergrad, and the professor had emailed me the night before, and she's like, we'll be talking about hydrocephalus tomorrow, and I wanted to ask if you wanted to talk about it. And I said, of course I do, and of course I will. And I went and talked with them, and she had actually asked me back 2 or 3 times since then to talk with her class anytime that she's going to be teaching about hydrocephalus, because she sees that there's a value in hearing a firsthand experience.
Amazing. And then you mentioned about some balloon techniques. Some of the doctor had this air balloon for the shunt to be able to last longer. Can you tell us about this new technology about shunt?
Sure. So we have been funding this particular project that you were speaking about since it was a drawing on a piece of paper. And now it's being tweaked slightly, but it actually has been implanted into patients. So basically, it's called the reflow device. It was developed by Dr. Matson at Boston Children's Hospital, as well as a company called, I think, Annuncia. Um, and basically, it's an airbag to the shunt. So the major complication with shunts is we get blockages in the proximal catheter, the catheter that's in the brain. And so basically, this device would allow us to be able to pump it. It's like it's a bubble that would allow us to use our own CSF actually and be able to pump it up and kind of blow out the occlusion, um, allowing for us to uninvasively unblock the shunt, which would eliminate the need for a surgery, which would have been a game changer for me because probably, I don't know the exact percentage, but probably about 95% of my malfunctions are a result of a blockage in the catheter that is in my brain. So if this reflow device was developed when I was born, I may have only needed 13 surgeries rather than 23, or 10 surgeries instead of 23. So we are making leaps and bounds with the research that we are able to fund. And that's why we fundraise, because we're seeing progress. And so we're just seeing I think we're seeing leaps and bounds, and I'm very excited to see where hydrocephalus research goes in the next decade.
So let's go back a little bit of how does this occur? But you quickly explain about E. coli and meningitis like infection when you're a baby. Yes. But then you also mentioned these days that you may see in adults, especially after traumatic brain injury, yes, in athletes as well. So what's going on now? Like how do people get hydrocephalus?
So you can get it as an infant from like an infection or in premature babies. Brain bleeds are common, which can result in hydrocephalus. As an adult, any major, well, not any, but any major traumatic brain injury can cause enough damage to your brain that results in damage to the cerebral spinal fluid pathways. So athletes are servicemen and women that are coming home with traumatic brain injury. They sometimes develop hydrocephalus, which I think is important to note. And then we also have our elderly population that develop what's called normal pressure hydrocephalus that is often misdiagnosed as dementia or Alzheimer's, but is in fact hydrocephalus. And if diagnosed and treated properly, they can go back to doing their normal daily activities.
Well, thank you so much for educating us about hydrocephalus. When you're pursuing for a PhD, but before that, you mentioned about Boston Children's Hospital. Is it like an internship or is it academia? Like what is going on with your path now with who is mentoring you, who's taking you under their wings?
So I've done internships with Boston Children's Hospital, Dr. Maria Littman's lab since I graduated high school. And when I for my senior thesis, for my undergrad, I had emailed Maria and I had asked, I need to do an independent research project, and I would love to research hydrocephalus. Is there a lab member that would take me under their wing for the semester and help me develop a research project to pursue? And she said, of course. And so I started working with one of her PhD fellows, Dr. Her name is Alex. And that was a phenomenal experience. And so when I had completed my bachelor's degree, she had reached out to me and asked me if I would be interested in joining the lab as a post-bachelor student or post-bachelor holder to continue my research with the expectation, I guess, that then I would go off and pursue my PhD. So hopefully my grant will be approved. We're still waiting on the approval, but hopefully my grant will be approved so that I can continue my the research I was conducting for my undergrad.
So I met a doctor just personally, want to share with you and our audience. When I was doing Lyft driver, I drove an oncology doctor who had diagnosed, who had suffered with leukemia when he was 5 years old, now became a doctor. And doing research of throat part of it, I'm not a doctor, but there's some part in the throat that rejuvenates the cells. So he got a grant approved, and he had patient trying out the rejuvenation part of the throat, how somehow with the blood, I have no idea. So what is it you think pursuing PhD with your experiences of being diagnosed with this condition would maybe help change the world someday?
I think having the condition speaks volume, because those that have a condition and then pursue a career to try to change or better that, they have a passion and they have an underlining drive. And I think that is powerful, because I think they're not just the general public. They're personally affected by something. And so they have this desire to better the lives of others with whatever they're going through. And that's especially true for me. A lot of the research that we're conducting now and that we're funding now won't necessarily help me, but knowing what I've gone through is enough motivation for myself to help them and aid them so that the next generation of infants and people with hydrocephalus don't have to necessarily suffer and go through what I went through. So I think having individuals that are affected by the condition themselves is a very powerful and important, very powerful and important.
Well, thank you, Isabella, for coming to Around Foxborough today. I just want to shout out to your mom, your parents, family members who believed in you when doctors said you would never walk, talk, hear, see. Look at you, you're talking like a PhD student or already a doctor, advocating for a lot of people who's been affected by this. And I really appreciate you bringing the awareness, coming to Around Foxborough today, and then having this very vulnerable conversations that can really maybe help someday online, that people will hear this conversation oh, we should reach out to Bella, we should reach out to this foundation because my kids, unfortunately, or my father, whoever the family member got affected with this. Because most of the fight is, I believe, in if you can identify the problem, there's a solution. But in the middle of it, when people get misdiagnosed, like you said, dementia or Alzheimer, when it was actually hydrocephalus, and then could have moved on. And I think it's important, not just the patient perspective, but doctors and researchers and hospitals, whoever is attending this matter. I think it's very important that you came to Around Foxborough today. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. Before you go, please let us know one more time your website where people can learn more about it. And if you could possibly spell it, that would be great.
Yes. You can find us on our website at hydrokids.org. And you're also able to find us on Facebook by searching Pediatric Hydrocephalus Foundation. Hydrocephalus is spelled HYDROCEPHALUS.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Bella, so much for coming to Around Foxborough tonight.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you, everyone, for watching Around Foxborough. My name is Julie Love. I'm your host. Our website is fcatv.org. You can click on Video on Demand, Studio Show, and watch all the episodes of Around Foxborough. Our director today is Paul Beck, and our assistant is Ryan Field. Our executive producer is Michael Weber. Thank you again for watching Around Foxborough. See you next time.